So let me first begin with some history, some very basic history. And let us come back to the Enlightenment, to the 18th century Enlightenment in Europe. You remember our discussion of the Enlightenment. We discussed the Enlightenment principle by principle. Remember our four major themes: reason, nature, liberty, and progress. And we also said that the practical implications of the Enlightenment were revolutions. The first revolution took place in the United States. 1776, Declaration of Independence. America establishes the first Enlightenment type state with the separation of powers, the separation between church and state, universal elections on each level, local, state level, and federal level. And in Europe, a similar revolution took place in France, French Revolution, of the end of the 18th century. It was bloodier, it was more cruel. It was not the revolution for national independence, it was a social revolution. The purpose of this revolution was to restructure society. And as a result of this revolution, in the beginning of the 19th century, after so much turmoil and change of power, Napoleon Bonaparte took power in his own hands and proclaimed himself the emperor. He was already a successful general who won several battles. He was the hero of France. So then he becomes the ruler of France, and he establishes his own law, the so-called Napoleonic Code. He undertakes some of the reforms, revolutionary reforms. He makes sure that taxation is fair. He establishes the French central bank. He gives back to the church all the property that was taken from the church during the revolution. So he does justice to the church, to the Catholic religion. So he does many things that are quite progressive, socially speaking, but at the same time, he is the conqueror. He conquers most of Europe except England. At some point, he proclaims himself the emperor of Europe and France and Europe. And in 1812, he declares war to Russia. So that was a mistake. Russia is a very large country with a very bad climate. And he believes that this will be a very quick victory. He was very successful. He was victorious. And soon after he declares war to Russia, he is able to take Moscow, the capital of Russia. But Moscow is left by the Russians, and he believed that the key from the city will be delivered to him. Instead, no keys, no city, no one in there. There is no infrastructure, there is no supply, no food. And he realizes that the winter is coming. And the winter in Russia is a real winter. You know, when in Philadelphia, for example, the winter comes. When we watch TV and a local meteorologist, that's how you call this person, Cecilia Tynan, I think. She declares that there will be, a serious winter, lots of snow, and minus 10 Celsius. You count this in Fahrenheit. I still count this in Celsius, as in Europe. So the worst that could happen here is minus 10. Minus 10 is the bottom. Americans are scared. They buy food as if, they have to survive for 6 months. They prepare for the disaster. In Russia, minus 10 is a great weather. I usually walk and enjoy, nice fresh air at minus 10. Russian winter is minus 24, sometimes minus 34, when you just go out and everything inside you freezes immediately. So you have to get used to this kind of climate, to this kind of cold, and Napoleon was not used to it. So he realizes that it will be a disaster, and he retreats to France. He loses most of his army, and as a result, basically, he is defeated. He made some other mistakes. He is defeated at Waterloo, and he is exiled to one of the islands. He is trying to escape, but eventually he dies. So in 1814, as a result of the Napoleonic Wars, European leaders decide to convene a Congress and re-establish order in Europe. The person who is convening this Congress is Prince Metternich of Austria. So Prince Metternich of Austria convenes this Congress, Congress of Vienna, and he invites the European powers to settle the disputes, especially territorial disputes that are left unresolved after Napoleonic Wars. And they agreed on two basic principles: the principle of legitimacy and the principle of compensation. So according to the principle of legitimacy, all those royal figures, all those kings that were dethroned as a result of Napoleonic Wars have to come back to their thrones and to assume their rulership. So according to the principle of legitimacy, all the kings come back to their power, and that meant the restoration of the previous order of things. According to the principle of compensation, all those nations that lost their territories as a result of Napoleonic War, but who helped defeat Napoleon, will be given back their lost territories. So overall, the Congress of Vienna set up a system that was trying to restore pre-Napoleonic, pre-revolutionary order. It was a system of reaction to the revolution. And the main purpose of the system was to stop any other revolutions from happening in Europe. In order to stop those revolutions, Prince Metternich and his allies established the so-called Quadrupled Alliance. The purpose of this Quadruple Alliance was to join forces, military forces, and suppress any revolution that takes place. Also, they created a net of spies, and those spies infiltrated all possible organizations, educational, religious, and others, in order to report to the government anything that would threaten the legitimacy of the government or any kind of critique of the government. So the purpose of the system was to suppress possible revolutions. Now this system survived for about 25, 35 years. It was successful, but not for a long time, because Europe was on the verge of a new era of democracy. Revolutions kept happening, but were suppressed. But finally, by the middle of the 19th century, a series of new revolutions took place in Europe. In 1820, a revolution in Spain against the king. It was put down by the Quadruple Alliance. 1821, revolutions in the Italian states failed. In 1821, 1829, revolution in Greece. Greece back then was part of the Turkish Empire. Greece was successful in achieving its independence. In 1830, uprisings in France, in Belgium, in Poland, many of the German and Italian states. So some of these revolutions were successful, some were suppressed. And finally, in 1848, violence broke all over Europe. There was a new uprising in France, The revolts started in Austria, Hungary, Prussia, Italian states, and Metternich barely escaped this revolt in Austria by cross-dressing as a woman and escaping to England. And that was the end of this era of reaction in Europe. And in the second half of the 19th century, we already have a totally different Europe, more and more democratizing, industrializing, and changing its political, social, and economic institutions.